Namaste and good morning. Let's start our Sunday class with some Gita Dhyanam mantras. Om Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasen Gratitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritvarshine Bhagavati Mashtadasha Dhyayane Am Tvam Anusandhami Bhagavad Gita Bhagaveshni नमो अस्तुते व्यास विशाल बुद्धे कुल अरविंद आयत पत्र नेत्र येन तव्या भारत तैल पूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञान में प्रदीप परपान पारी जाताये तोत्र वेत्र एक पानये ज्ञान मुद्राय कृष्णाय गीता अमृत दुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोगदा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोगता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूरमर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगद्गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथचला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्राहवती कृपेन वाहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोर मकरा दुर्योधन आवर्तने सो तीर्णा खलु पांडवै रन्नदी के वर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोजमलम गीता अर्थकंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपदय रह पे पिये मानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल प्रध्वंसी न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरिम यत्कृपातमहं वंदे परमानंद माधवम यम ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र रुद्र मरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यस्तवे वेदै सांगपद क्रमोपनिषदै गायन्ति यम सामगा ध्यानवस्थि तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुसुर असुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. So chapter 15, and we ended our last week's class with verse number 17. Uttamaha purushatu anya paramatma iti udahrita ya loktrayam avishya bivati avyaha ishvara. So having spoken about the world and the souls, Lord Krishna is speaking of the God here. Paramatma. Paramatma. Okay. So this is where we ended the class. So now let's start today's class with verse number 18. It's a very short chapter, very deep chapter though. Only 20 verses. So verse number 18. Yasmat ksharam atita aham aksharat api cha uttamaha ataha asmi loke vede cha prathitaha purushottamaha. Yasmat as ksharam, the perishable. Atitaha, transcend. Aham, I. Aksharat, then the imperishable. Api means also, cha means and, uttam, best. Ataha, therefore, asmi, I am, loke in the world, vede in the Vedas. Cha means and, prathita, declared. Purushottama, the highest Purush, Purushottam. As I transcend the perishable, and am even higher than the imperishable. Therefore, I am declared as the Purushottam, the highest Purush, in the world and in the Vedas. So over here, perishable is the Prakriti. The imperishable is the Atma he's talking about. And highest Purush is the Purushottam. So he calls his divine personality as Purushottam. So Shri Krishna phrases this verse so as to refer to himself in the first person, like a singular. So explaining the very word Purushottam, Lord Krishna says that pure consciousness is higher than both the perishable and the imperishable. See, perishable can continue its processes of change only against the imperishable truth. So that means this body of ours is perishable, but it can continue, go through the changes from the birth to the growth to the ultimate depth of this body only when the Atma is there. And it is a scientific fact that no change is perceptible without reference to the changeless factor. So changeless factor in us is the Atma. So that's why it's called the imperishable. So this illuminating factor gathers its status as the imperishable only with the reference to the perishable. Remember that. Once the perishable realms are transcended, the imperishable itself comes to shine forth as the pure infinite, which is Purushottama. Okay, so this Atma, which he's calling it imperishable. So Atma, when it transcends it all, the body also, mind also, intellect also, the subtle body also, the causal body also, and of course the gross body, it becomes one with the pure infinite, which is Purushottama. So highest spirit, Purushottama. So then he says, this Purushottama, the Supreme Self, in the Vedas also, and by the knowers of the Vedas also. So that means the poets and the writers of the world also, they all have called it a Purushottama. And now in the next verse, verse number 19, he speaks of the fruits gained by one who realizes this supreme truth, the Purushottama. Because that is our goal, to know that we are part of Purushottama. Yamam evam asamudaha janati Purushottama sa sarvavit bhajati mam sarvabhavena bharata. Ya means who, mam means me, evam das asamudaha, undiluted. Okay, so mood is deluded, asamuda is undiluted. Janati knows, Purushottam, the Supreme Purush. Sa means he, sarvavit, all knowing. Bhajati, worships. Mam me, sarvabhaven, with his whole being. Bharat, that is for Arjuna. He who undiluted thus knows me, the Supreme Purusha. He, all knowing, worships me with his whole being. So first he says one who is undiluted. It means one who has totally detached oneself from one's wrong identifications. That is undiluted. These are all the various vehicles we are traveling in, whether it's a body or the mind or the intellect or the ego. So when we detach from them, the world of the perceptions, the feelings, the thoughts, those are the vehicles provided to us to reach the goal. But in our delusion, we start identifying ourselves with the vehicles. We got to transcend those. So he says, undeluded thus knows me. To know over here means it's not just a mere intellectual comprehension, but a deep, subjective, spiritual apprehension. Remember that. It's not just a theoretically knowing, it's experiential. Such a person who has fully identified himself with the infinite, he says me over here, alone is a true devotee. Devotee is one who loves his Lord. That's why worships me with all his being. Worship means loving me. Such a person is the greatest of the devotees. That's what Lord Krishna is declaring. So identification with the beloved is everywhere the measure of love. Greater the love, the greater is our identification with the object of our love. So total identification should be the maximum love. And that's what Lord Krishna is saying. Disidentify yourself with the temporary and identify with me. That's devotion. The highest spirit, the Purushottama, infinite consciousness, is the all-knower. Whenever anything is known through perception, feeling, or thoughts, it is the principle of consciousness that illumines it. So whether it's a body or the mind or the intellect, there's a divine contact with that. Only then we know. And a person who has transcended the matter equipment is successfully discovered the spiritual nature, which is called the infinite consciousness. And then he also adds over here, all knower sarvavit. The knowledge of the true nature of the Lord is the theme of this chapter. We know that. And in this last verse, verse number 20, he is concluding this theme. He says, Iti guhutamam shastram idam uktam maya anag etat budhva buddhiman krit kritya cha bharat. Iti means thus, guhutamam, most secret. See, there's a guhutar, and guhutam. So over here, guhutam, the most secret. Shastram, teachings. Idam means this, uktam, has been taught. Maya, by me, anag, O sinless one. Etat means this, buddhva, wise, buddhiman, becomes. Krit krityaha, accomplished all the duties. The person who feels fulfilled, krit kritya. Cha means and, bharat, Arjuna. Thus, this most secret science, the teachings, has been taught by me, O sinless one. Knowing this, a person becomes wise, and all his duties are accomplished. There's nothing more to do. O Bharat. So the final verse of this chapter begins with the word iti. Iti. Iti over here means, so he's just implying that in these 20 verses, I have summarized this. So iti means thus also, iti means these also. So all these verses, I'm trying to tell you this. So he has taught in this chapter the most secret science, Guhutamam Shastram, which is called a Brahma Vidya also. And a secret science or secret teachings does not mean that we should not share it with others. Secret over here means it's very profound. It's very deep. This is a knowledge which cannot of its own accord come to anyone unless one is initiated into it. That means you got to really learn it from a teacher who really knows it. Because just reading the words, you don't get it. That's what it really means. It's such a secret. That's why Lord Krishna had to tell it to Arjuna. And even to tell Arjuna, he had to go through all this with his grace also, with his words also, with the examples also, a lot of analogies he has been giving. And what is a sin? We do talk about it from time to time, but I do want to mention it, that a sin could be an act, it could be a feeling, it could be a thought, which just once we have done, it comes back after a time to agitate us. That's how it becomes a little obstacle. It could be a helpless regret. Okay, that becomes a sin. It becomes a little obstacle between us and our goal. So sin is the resultant of the past that comes to demean our self-estimate of ourselves and creates in us a lot of mental storms or in mental dissipation also. That is a sin. So that's why I said it could be an act, it could be a feeling, it could be a word, it could be a thought. So one who has a kind of an inner personality which carries disturbing memories of undignified acts, cruel schemes, definitely has a very agitated mind, agitated heart. There's a restlessness, and that is a sin. Such a mind, intellect, equipment cannot consistently apply itself to any serious or deep investigation. And to know God, to really dig deeper into ourselves, we got to work on it. That's why we got to transcend the mind and the intellect. So the term sinless in this context means that have a steady mind, be alert, be a vigilant student. It's not only during our meditation, during our studies, during our prayers, but other times also. Be very alert. So that there's no obstacle in between barrier. So he who has realized this Purushottama state of consciousness becomes wise, he says. Because after that, he will not make any error of judgment in his life. There won't be any confusions, sorrows for himself and for others also. And second of the benefits, he says, so this is one benefit he's talking about. Once we reach to that goal, this is the benefit. The second benefit, which gets accrued by contacting the Purushottama state, is the enjoyment of complete sense of fulfillment. Kritkritya. A complete and overwhelming joy you feel. When a person realizes that he has fully accomplished what is expected of him, that kind of a feeling in all endeavors. So this is what he's promising to us in this verse. The reward for the realization of Purushottama. Can you imagine this reward? No desires left. There's only joy and joy and joy. Once you reach there. The import of all these Vedic scriptures is this. He has been talking about the nature of the world, to the distinction between the matter and the spirit, and finally he takes us towards the highest realization of the absolute truth. And he is telling us what is the benefit of it too. He is giving us assurance over here that whoever embraces this knowledge will become truly enlightened. Such a person, such a soul will accomplish the goal of all works and duties, which is God realization. Before we end this chapter, I want to go through these three terms we often use: Brahm, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. I know here and there I do give you the definitions, but maybe there are some new students over here. In this chapter alone, all these three are used. If you go back on verses 12 to 14, he calls it a Brahma. Verse 15, he mentions Paramatma. And in verses 17 and 18, he talked about Bhagwan. What do they really mean? One supreme entity that manifests in three ways in the world: Brahm, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. These are not three different entities. They are just three manifestations of the same supreme entity. Let me take your mind towards water, ice, and steam. They definitely appear to be distinct entities, but they're actually three forms of the same substance. So the same way, Brahm is the aspect of God that is formless and all-pervading. Those who follow the path of Jnana Yoga worship the Brahm aspect of God. Okay? Kan kan mein Brahm vyapta. Paramatma is the aspect of the supreme entity that resides in the hearts of all living beings as the supreme soul. The path of Ashtanga Yoga leads to the Paramatma realization of God. And Bhagwan is the aspect of the Lord that manifests in a personal form and performs sweet leelas. As a Lord Krishna, as a Lord Ram, or any other avatar. So the path of bhakti or devotion leads to the realization of God in his Bhagwan aspect. So we should not be confused about these three. Bhagavad Puran said, Vadanti tat tattvam vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmiti paramatma iti bhagwan iti shabhyate. He says the knowers of the truth have stated that there's only one supreme entity that manifests in three ways in the world, Brahm, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. Bhagavad Puran also says that. Okay, so towards the end of this chapter, I thought this was important to know the definitions of these three. Okay, so this ends this chapter 15. And now the next chapter, chapter 16, Dev Asur Sampad Vibhag Yoga. Dev means divine, Asur means undivine or devilish. So these are the qualities. Every system of ethics catalogs a series of virtues and vices. And if we look at different systems, strangely enough, all the systems read the same way. Virtues are the same in every religion, every sect, every system, and vices are the same everywhere. No matter which name we give it to that system. So irrespective of creed, climb, race, tongue, good man is a good man because of those virtues. There could be slight differences between faith and faith. Otherwise, some people like to sit on the floor, crossed leg, closing eyes, trying to see God within. Some people can sit on the chair or stand, look up. Some cover their head, some uncover their head. Language could be different, but the values and the vices are the same. Okay, so this Dev Asura Sampad Vibhag. So in this chapter, Lord Krishna describes the two kinds of nature, the saintly and the demonic. You can phrase it like that also. The saintly nature develops by following the instructions of the scriptures, cultivating the mode of goodness, and purifying the mind through spiritual practice. It leads to God realization. And in contrast, there's also a demonic nature that develops from associating with the modes of passion. ignorance and embracing the materialistic view. There's no introduction needed for this chapter. You will see that even Lord Krishna, from the very first verse, he just starts giving the qualities of a Devata first. He starts out with a very positive note. Then later on we'll see how he goes into the demonic nature also. He wants us to feel good about it. Because we all have certain good qualities also. We can recognize those. And by recognizing the good qualities, we should let go of the not so good qualities, because our goal is 100% good. Because we want to become one with God, all divine. Okay, let's look at verse number 1. So Lord Krishna is speaking. Abhyam satav samshuddhi jnana yog vivasthiti danam dama cha yagya cha swadhyaya tapaha arjuvan. Abhyam, fearlessness. Sattva samshuddhi, purity of heart. Jnana yoga vyavasthiti, steadfastness in the yoga of knowledge. Jnana yoga. Danam, almsgiving, charity. Damaha, control of senses. Cha means and, yagya, sacrifice. Again, cha means and, swadhyaya, study of the scriptures. Tapaha, austerity. Arjavam, straightforwardness. Fearlessness, purity of heart, steadfastness in the yoga of knowledge, almsgiving, control of the senses, sacrifice, study of the scriptures, austerity, and straightforwardness. So in this opening verse, we are reminded of some of the qualities which have been described earlier also. In chapter 13, we saw these. In chapter 2 also we saw this. Here and there he keeps on putting, but right now he's really giving us 26 values of life altogether. Some of them are in this verse and some in the next few verses. First one, he says, fearlessness. Where does the fear come from? If you pay attention to, attachment of any kind causes fear. Attachment to wealth, attachment to social prestige, attachment to this body. We always think that it can be taken away from us and the fear comes. So that's why it's really interesting to see that he puts fearlessness as the very first quality of a Devata. Fear is generated in a person only when a person is clouded by ignorance. More the ignorance, higher the fear. It's almost like a thicker the dirt on the mirror, the less clear will it be able to see. So fear is the expression of avidya, ignorance. Where there's a knowledge, there is a fearlessness. And Devata has all the knowledge. They really means illumined. When you have that kind of a personality, then there's no doubt. There's no doubt, there's no fear. The second quality, he talks about purity of heart, sattva samshuddhi. This really means a state of inner cleanliness. Mind generates thoughts, sentiments, feelings, and emotions. When these are ethical, wholesome, positive, uplifting, they are called pure. It's not that we got to get rid of the mind. We got to purify the mind. That's why Gita is considered a very dynamic scripture. It's militant both in its theory and practice. Lord Krishna is not satisfied by a tame generation of passive goodness. He wants us to become perfect in every way. Learn to live with each other. Remember what the higher values are of life. There should be a positive glow of righteousness in us. We got to learn how to bathe in the light of truth and virtue. Virtue that implies honesty of intention and purity of motives. That is called Sattva Samshuddhi. It's a pretty deep word. Only if we are fearless, we can be totally pure at heart. Remember that. There's a reason he has given all this in this way. The connection between one word to the other is very important. A fearful person can never have a completely pure heart. There are selfish motives. Then he says a steadfastness and devotion to knowledge. We got to have knowledge. When humans forget what is right and what is wrong, they behave like animals. In the Vedas, there's a saying, Tattva Vismakhyat Bhekivat. So we got to have the knowledge. We have to go to the Guru to learn what to do, what not to do, what is right, what's wrong, what is temporary, what is permanent. If we don't do that, we are no better than animals. So this ethical purity at the level of the heart cannot be brought about when the human mind is turned outward. Only when the mind is constantly held up in unison with the infinite song of soul, it can discover the necessary courage to renounce the lower appetites. So that's why devotion to knowledge, Jnana Yoga, is a positive way to persuade the mind to let go of the lower temptations. A mind that is awakened to the serener joys of the self will naturally never hang on to the sensuous objects and their fleeting joys. So that's why this Jnana Yoga is so important. Then he says charity, restraint of the senses, and sacrifice. Dhanam, dhanam, yagyacha. In the second line. These three are the techniques by which an individual successfully tunes up his man and buddhi in order to discover the required amount of steady devotion to knowledge. We need these. Charity must come from our own sense of abundance. If we think that we don't have enough, we really cannot share with somebody else. Dhan is a very important part of our life. We have taken so much from this society. We have taken so much from this nature. Have we ever thought about what have we given back? Charity springs only from a sense of oneness in us. Oneness. Oneness between the giver and the recipient. If hand says, I want to just hold on to that apple, not it put into the mouth, what will happen? If the mouth says, I want to just chew it and keep it over there, not let it go down, what will happen? This body is one unit, but then this unit is part of that bigger unit. We see that in the family. Parents earn, they take care of the children because it's a unit. Then the society, then the city, then the country. Then there's a unity between the countries also. When we don't have that, we all suffer. So over here, Lord Krishna is saying that charity, the dhanam, is so important. Go back to that sense of oneness. Unless we are able to identify ourselves with others, we really cannot share. We cannot share. Dhan is born out of a capacity to restrain our instincts of acquisition and replacement with the spirit of sacrifice. So that's why Dhan, Dham, and Yajna, they are connected. If my senses are in control, and if I live a life Yajna Rupi, then Dhan becomes very easy. Control of the senses, living a life as a Yajna Rupi. Yajna Rupi life is where you do the actions, you just spread the fruits. Even in the fire ceremony, what do we do? That's one form of a yajna. What do we do in that? We put beautiful dry wood. We put herbs in there. We put ghee in there. Do all those pure things. They change the form. Nothing gets destroyed. Even the science says they change the form. They go into the space. They can just go anywhere, purify the clouds. Pure clouds will give, they can go anywhere. We are not holding it. Then those pure clouds will give the pure rain. Pure rain will give the pure crop. And the mantras which we sing with it, can we just hold them? No, it goes into the space. Shabda is connected with the space. Shabd is the tan matra of the space. Akash just goes everywhere. That's a yajna. Any action where the benefit, we just let it go. We don't hold it. So sacrifice, then control of the senses, then dhan becomes very easy. Otherwise, if the senses are not in control, if our life is not a yajna rupi, we'll be misers. If dhan develops in one the capacity to detach oneself from the wealth that one possesses and share it with others who don't have enough, we can say that daman of the indriyas has been done. Okay? So the true charity is that which is done not with the feeling of superiority, but with a sense of gratefulness to God. That's why sacrifice is very much part of it. We should feel good that God has given us the opportunity to help. Don't try to be a penny pincher. It's plenty. Always have that feeling of gratefulness, what God has given it to us. Can we thank enough our Lord? So without dam and dan, this pilgrimage towards the truth is merely a dream. Okay, we are just thinking about it, we are dreaming about it, we cannot reach there. It's 11:22. Let's stop it here because there's a lot more to go over in this verse also. So we'll start from here next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much for coming.